In the summer of 1755, long before the United States existed, and long before George Washington would become a symbol of a nation, he was simply a young officer riding into a wilderness war. He was 23 years old. America had not yet been born, but the land that would one day become it was already contested by empires thousands of miles away. The forests of North America were not empty. They were watched, claimed, and fought over. Beneath the towering trees, British and French ambitions collided in a struggle for control of the Ohio River Valley, a region rich in trade routes, rivers, and strategic importance. For the British Empire, controlling this land meant dominance in North America. For France, losing it meant the slow collapse of their colonial presence. To secure the region, Britain sent an experienced general named Edward Braddock westward with nearly 2,000 men. His mission was direct and dangerous: capture a French stronghold known as Fort Duquesne, located near present-day Pittsburgh. George Washington rode with Braddock as an aide-de-camp. At the time, Washington was not famous. He was not a general. He had no legendary reputation. He was a colonial officer, eager to prove himself, ambitious, disciplined, and already familiar with the unforgiving nature of frontier warfare. Unlike many European officers, Washington understood something Braddock did not. European armies were trained to fight in open fields, standing in straight lines, guided by drums, flags, and rigid discipline. The American wilderness allowed none of that. The roads were narrow. The forest was thick. Visibility was limited. And enemies could move silently through the trees, unseen and unheard. As Braddock's column advanced deeper into the wilderness, Washington grew uneasy. He warned that the army was vulnerable to ambush. He cautioned that the traditional European style of warfare would fail in this environment. The warnings were dismissed. On July 9, 1755, Braddock's force crossed the Monongahela River, just 7 miles from Fort Duquesne. They believed they were close to victory. Instead, they were walking into disaster. Without warning, gunfire erupted from the forest. French soldiers and Native American warriors, concealed among the trees, opened fire on the exposed British column. The attack was sudden, coordinated, and devastating. British troops struggled to respond. Trained to face visible enemies in orderly formations, they found themselves firing blindly into smoke and shadows. The battlefield dissolved into chaos. Men fell where they stood. Officers, easily identified by their uniforms and mounted positions, became immediate targets. One by one, they were shot down. Commands could not be heard. Formations collapsed. Panic spread through the ranks. In the midst of the confusion, George Washington rode back and forth across the battlefield. He carried messages, rallied troops, and attempted to impose order on a force that was rapidly disintegrating. He was everywhere, and because of that, he was impossible to miss. Washington's height, his uniform, and his position on horseback made him a clear target. Bullets tore through the air around him. At least one horse beneath him was shot dead, then another. Still, he continued riding. Later, when the fighting had ended, Washington discovered that his coat had been pierced by multiple bullets. By his own account, 4 shots passed directly through his clothing, and yet none struck his body. Around him, death was relentless. Of the 86 officers who entered the battle with General Braddock, 63 were killed or wounded. Braddock himself was mortally injured. The British force collapsed entirely. What remained of the army retreated in confusion, leaving behind hundreds of dead and wounded. Washington played a critical role in organizing the retreat, preventing what could have become a complete annihilation. Only after the fighting ended did the full reality begin to sink in. Washington had been directly in the line of fire. He had been targeted. His horses had been killed beneath him. His clothing bore the marks of gunfire. And yet, he had escaped without a single wound. In the days that followed, Washington struggled to understand his survival. In a letter written shortly after the battle, he reflected on what had happened. He wrote that he had been preserved beyond all human probability and expectation. He did not describe it as luck. He did not claim it was skill. He believed that something greater had intervened. News of Washington's survival spread quickly. Among those who witnessed the battle were Native American warriors, experienced marksmen who understood forest warfare far better than their European counterparts. Years later, a story emerged that one of these warriors claimed to have fired repeatedly at Washington from close range. According to the account, every shot missed. The warrior reportedly lowered his weapon and told his companions that Washington was not meant to die that day. The details of the story vary. Some versions claim 17 shots. Others claim 18. Historians debate the accuracy of the account, as it was recorded many years after the battle. But the foundation of the story remains undeniable. George Washington survived a battle in which death was almost unavoidable. That survival became part of his legend long before the American Revolution began. Years later, when Washington would lead the Continental Army against the British, many remembered the day he seemed untouched by death. And later still, when he became the first president of the United States, the story of that battlefield followed him. To many, it was not coincidence. It was a moment when history itself seemed to pause. Washington never spoke of the event with exaggeration. He did not claim to be chosen or invincible. He simply acknowledged that he had been spared. Whether by chance, fate, or providence, he lived. And because he lived, the course of American history would unfold as it did. The nation did not yet exist. But deep in the wilderness of North America, on a battlefield filled with smoke, confusion, and bloodshed, one life was preserved, and with it, the future of a country that had not yet found its name. But this moment did not make George Washington invincible. In fact, not long after surviving that battlefield, he would face his first and only defeat in war. A defeat that nearly ended his career before it truly began. That story comes next. If you want to continue following these true American stories, consider subscribing.